Welcome to the Coin Bureau Weekly Crypto Review. Here are this week's top headlines in the crypto news. Crypto Market Recap, an overview of all the crypto and macro factors that moved the market last week and what other effects they could have in the near term. Ethereum achievement. The second largest cryptocurrency successfully transitions from proof of work to proof of stake. So, why is ETH crashing? And why aren't institutions buying? SEC versus cryptocurrency. Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Gary Gensler reiterates that almost every cryptocurrency except BTC is a security. What does this mean for altcoins? Terra investigation. Law enforcement agencies target Terra co-founder Do Kwon 4 months after one of the largest crypto catastrophes. Everything you need to know. Privacy coin crackdown. Huobi delists major privacy coins citing regulatory concerns, leading to more concerns that other top exchanges could soon start doing the same. When could this happen? And a closer look at last week's top performing cryptos and where they're headed next. All this and more in just a moment. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Guy, and what you're about to see is educational content, not financial advice. You can find any topics you're looking for using the timestamps in the video timeline. And now for today's top stories. Last week, the crypto market resumed its long-term downtrend after the inflation figures for August in the United States came in much hotter than expected. Although the headline, i.e. main CPI, was lower than the previous month, the core CPI was actually higher. If you watched our video about Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell's Jackson Hole speech, you'll know that he said the Fed will continue to raise interest rates until it sees more signs that inflation is easing. Now, there were hopes that the August CPI print would be another sign of declining inflation, but alas. Investors are now anxiously awaiting the Fed's next press conference, which is scheduled for this Wednesday. Note that this will be the first time the Fed has met since before the summer break, and it looks like the Fed could respond to the August CPI print with a larger than expected rate hike. If you're subscribed to my weekly newsletter, you'll know how much this could impact the crypto market in percentage terms. Be sure to subscribe using the link below to get my forward guidance, by the way. Now, another macro factor that seems to have affected the crypto market is the news that the pandemic is coming to a close. According to the World Health Organization, the end of the pandemic is in sight, and according to Axios, concerns about the pandemic are at their lowest point yet. Now, in theory, this should be very bullish for markets because it means that any remaining pandemic-related issues that are driving up inflation could soon subside. That being said, there are growing concerns that rising energy costs could keep inflation high in the United States and elsewhere as winter approaches. Besides the increased demand for energy for heating, there are 3 other factors to keep in mind going forward. The first is that if the pandemic is indeed coming to a close, then it means the ongoing lockdowns in China could likewise come to an end. In a recent episode of Blockworks, macro analyst Andrew Simon explained that the end of lockdowns in China would create a surge in demand for energy from the restart of manufacturing. This ties into the second factor, and that's that the United States has been gradually emptying its strategic oil reserves to reduce inflation at the pump. It's estimated that these oil reserves will run out sometime in early November, which is coincidentally just before the midterm elections, coincidentally being the key word. According to Bloomberg, the current administration is looking to begin refilling the US's strategic oil reserves before they run out. The thing is that they're reportedly planning on beginning their oil purchases when the price hits $80 a barrel, effectively setting a very high price floor for oil in the country. Now, the third factor to keep in mind is one I mentioned last week, and that's that G7 countries are planning on imposing a global price cap on Russian oil come early December. The Kremlin has responded by saying that it will effectively cut all exports of all kinds to the West if this price cap is applied. Meanwhile, the US Treasury Department has threatened to sanction any country that makes, quote, significant purchases of oil above the price cap. This is probably why Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen recently predicted that oil prices will rise in the winter. She knows the price cap will have this effect. So, what this means is that inflation is likely to surge over the winter, and this will force central banks around the world to continue raising interest rates aggressively to bring demand back in line with supply, as Jerome recently said. Seems he doesn't know that demand for heat in winter isn't elastic. In terms of crypto-specific factors, the most significant was, of course, the merge, which saw Ethereum successfully transition from proof of work to proof of stake last Thursday. The entire crypto market was rallying up to the merge, but as you all know well, the market crashed a few hours after the event. In addition to the poor CPI print from the day before, ETH's poor price action was due to ETH holders selling the news. According to blockchain analytics tools like Nansen and Glassnode, more than $1 billion of ETH flowed onto exchanges shortly before the merge, the most in 6 months. If you watched our video about on-chain analysis, you'll know that large amounts of crypto moving onto an exchange typically signals an intention to sell. In this case, it looks like most of the sellers were Ethereum miners, whose ETH holdings had hit a 4-year high at the end of August. Now, to be clear, some sell pressure from Ethereum miners and early ETH holders was expected and probably even priced in. What was not expected or priced in, however, was how institutional investors would react to the merge. In other words, the demand side of the post-merge ETH equation. For context, many ETH holders were expecting institutional investors to buy up large amounts of ETH the moment the merge was complete. This is because the merge lowered Ethereum's energy usage, something that had been a big concern of ESG-obsessed investors. If you follow us on Instagram, however, you'll know that institutional investors had actually begun offloading ETH the week before, according to CoinShares. They chalked it up to concerns that something might go wrong during the merge, and though that wasn't the case, it's the right idea. Basically, it's more than likely that institutional investors are waiting on the sidelines to make absolutely sure that the merge was, in fact, a success. Put differently, they're hanging back to see if something goes wrong on Ethereum's beacon chain in the days and weeks following the merge. This might even include concerns around centralization, and it looks like there is no shortage of such concerns. Case in point, blockchain analytics tool Sentiment found that around 40% of blocks on the beacon chain are being produced by just 2 validators, specifically Coinbase and Lido Finance. Over the weekend, Cointelegraph reported that over 80% of all relay blocks on the beacon chain are being built by Flashbots, a tool used to track and mitigate miner extractable value, or MEV. Now, relay blocks and MEV are outside the scope of this video, but I'll leave a few resources in the description for you. Now, it's not just centralization on the beacon chain that has ETH holders concerned about Ethereum. There are also concerns about Ethereum infrastructure providers such as EmRa, which dominate their respective layers of the Ethereum stack. More about Ethereum's post-merge condition later this week. Now, to EmRa's credit, the company recently announced that it will be decentralizing its infrastructure. Oddly enough, EmRa's parent company, Consensus, explained that the plan has always been to decentralize its products from day one, including the popular MetaMask browser extension wallet. I say oddly because EmRa's announcement came shortly after SEC Chairman Gary Gensler commented that proof-of-stake cryptocurrencies could be seen as securities. As we've seen with cryptocurrencies like XRP, a securities designation would result in a delisting from all US exchanges, and worse. Gary's comments could actually be another reason why institutions haven't FOMO'd into ETH just yet. They are likely waiting for regulatory clarity about ETH's post-merge status before making any big moves. Note that crypto regulations are cited as the greatest concerns among institutional investors. Regardless of all this, however, there is a lot to look forward to for proof-of-stake Ethereum, and I'll be doing a video on it in the next few days, so keep your eyes peeled. Unfortunately for all the institutions that are interested in ETH, it doesn't look like the SEC will be providing regulatory clarity anytime soon. That's because Gary recently reiterated that almost every cryptocurrency is a security without explaining why. To clarify, a security is an asset like a stock in a company. Now, whether an asset counts as a security is supposed to be determined by something called the Howey test. The TLDR there is that if there is a third party you can identify that's creating an expectation of profit, then said asset is a security. The problem is that this doesn't seem to be the same criterion the SEC is using. If you watched our recent video about the cryptocurrencies the SEC is targeting, you'll know that the regulator is hypersensitive to anything that could be considered promotion of a cryptocurrency by a centralized party. In theory, larger altcoins like Ethereum and Cardano should be safe from the SEC scrutiny because they're sufficiently decentralized. This means that you can't single out a specific entity that's creating an expectation of profit when you stack ETH or ADA. In practice, however, Gary unironically believes that every single altcoin is a security, including stablecoins. Gary laid out his reasoning for this in his recent testimony, which took place on the same day as the merge. Another coincidence, if ever there was one. Now, I'll be breaking down exactly what Gary said in a video later this week, so all I'll say for now is that Gary sees Ethereum, Cardano, and others as fair game for the SEC. This is because there are individuals like Vitalik Buterin and institutions like Input-Output that are creating expectations of profit, or so Gary says. I'll reiterate that this is Gary's reasoning, not mine. And while Gary's comments are supposed to be nothing more than his personal opinion, they clearly could carry over to the SEC's policy.